Hello, hi. I just watched episode 8 of Lovecraft Country, and y'all, I needed a cocktail after that. That was intense, more so than even the other shows. So let's get into it. So, first of all, they hit us with the gut punch from the open. You know, we knew based on, I think it was either episode 5 or 6 when we first met Bobo, we knew that that was Emmett Till. People figured that out, and we knew that his murder was going to factor into the season in some way. You know, it was tough to know how, but we knew it was going to come up because when they were playing with the Ouija board said his trip down south was not going to go well. So that was hella foreshadowing, i.e., you know, historical context, etc. And so we knew that was going to happen. Had no idea when. And also, I saw the previews for this week, last week, and I saw some videos kind of floating around YouTube where people were doing deep dives into tonight's episode based on the preview. And I purposely didn't watch it because I wanted to walk into it with a fresh perspective and not be swayed by any kind of previous conversation. So I didn't look at any of those. And so I was hit in the gut punch. If you didn't see any of those, you might have been hit too. But, you know, it's very funny or interesting. It's not funny laughter, but it's very interesting seeing kind of how they are reenacting his funeral, where, you know, his mom purposely had an open casket because she wanted to show the world what those white men in the South had done to her son. And so, you know, seeing the people all kind of filing in with the level of just grim determination, like, I don't want to see this, but I'm here because I understand the importance. Seeing people come out throwing up, because I'm sure, you know, all of us, many of us, if you have it, you can easily Google Emmett Till's murder, and you will almost immediately be brought to an article that shows the picture of his open casket funeral service. And it looks horrific in a black and white picture. So I can only imagine how it looked in person at that time. And then the conversation with Ruby and Diana, where, you know, she's like, what is that smell? And Ruby's like, it's really hot. And it's like, oh my God, of course, you know, this is the 50s. Like, I'm sure embalming technology has come a long way since then. But just the horrific nature of that and kind of the horror of that. And, you know, that's essentially their version of what we see kind of plastered all over various social media platforms whenever a black person is killed by the police, where, you know, we see them being killed and why that's passed around. And her doing that was kind of to make the same point. Like, you guys are not going to continue to act like this doesn't happen. Here it is in your face in its rawest, most real, uncut form. And so that was like, whoa, we are starting this episode off with a bang. And then, of course, that's just the beginning. And, you know, we all know what that means. That's definitely a historical moment of significance. And we, of course, don't sit there because, as with every episode of Lovecraft Country, once the car is moving, we're on the ride and there is no getting off. And so we immediately kind of go where you see Ruby is, of course, outdone, because Bobo isn't just a kid that, you know, is in her neighborhood as with some of those other people who were there. Bobo was her friend. So she lost her friend. She lost her friend in this very horrific, horrible, terrible way. And now his funeral is kind of this national spectacle. And it's like, you can only imagine what could be going through her mind. So, of course, her just inability to process and just desire to leave makes perfect sense. So, of course, she leaves. Now, we have to remember that last episode where Hippolyta had her moment of ascension, literally, she had the comic. She had Diana's comic with her, and, you know, she disappeared into the portal. She didn't come back right away, and Diana's comic was laying underneath the dead police officer that Hippolyta had shot. So you know, we know that that's going to come around somehow in this episode. And sure enough, the police chief and his lackey, Captain Lancaster and his lackey, pull up on her, and it was a, you know, I appreciated that scene, and its level of unvarnished, kind of just the way that they treated her so poorly, because it showed how black girls and black women are often just as abused by the police, with the same level of disregard and the same level of dehumanization that she was treated. And he cast a spell on her, he spit on her, which was disgusting. And now, you know, initially you think something immediately bad is going to happen to her. But anytime you're dealing with spell casting and, you know, witchcraft and things like that in these types of movies, as far as canon, oftentimes it's more realistic when the person is not immediately just like stricken down, where it's more of a slow burn. And sure enough, this entire episode was about, in that side, was about Diana's experience with being cursed. And so she's been cursed by Captain Lancaster, and she is now being haunted by these two children. And, you know, of course they are dressed like the very, in the kind of the caricature of the pickaninny, where, you know, they have the over exaggerated mouths with like the red lips, they have the hair that's like all spiked out. And so I went on, you know, after every episode, I always ultimately end up doing some type of Google search trying to figure out what is the historical context of what we saw. Now, I always miss 17,000 things, which is why I listen to the Lovecraft radio podcast. I, you know, am in a Facebook group where they talk about it, because there's always more information and someone always sees something that I didn't notice, which is why this show is so fantastic. But those two children, they stood out to me, and so I did a search. I don't know if this is true or not, so I would love, you know, insight from anybody. If you're watching this and you've seen it, I don't know if this is true. I'm interested to see if I'll get some more insight when I do listen to Lovecraft Radio later tomorrow. But I did a Google search and learned actually, because I wasn't aware of the Gold Dust twins, which were these kind of, you know, sexually and gender ambiguous. Like you couldn't tell if they were boys or girls. They were just these two black children who represented this washing powder line. And when I Googled it, you see them, and you know, when they describe the commercials, it's like they're washing, they're doing laundry, they're cleaning because it's a washing powder. But when you see the pictures of them, they're like in these exaggerated poses as if they were dancing. And that's what the girls who were following Diana around, it was the creepiest shit ever. You see these little girls with these exaggerated smiles, with these racist caricatures, which is like one part offensive, 3 parts horrifying, and they're following her around and they're dancing and they're like skipping, they're like vacillating between kind of skipping, kind of like childlike dancing and frolicking, to this kind of almost like living dead, kind of like, you know, the twitchiness, and like as if their bones are kind of like they're back breaking. It was just super creepy. And so I'm wondering if that is it. I'm going to do some more research after this, but in the comments, let me know if you think the same, or if there's another kind of set of racist caricature. I'm sure that there is no, there weren't any others, so they're very, very well could be referring to a completely different set of children. But I just did a quick Google search and learned about the Gold Dust twins, so I'm very interested and curious to know if those are kind of a representation of that, outside of just being a representation of, you know, the racist caricature that they played. And of course, the girls, they came off of the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was in, I don't know if that was Diana's room, but it was in the house where she was, and she saw it, and that was where they kind of stepped off of that cover. So I know that it was from that character, but the fact that there were 2 of them just makes me wonder if they represented something else. I'm curious, but that definitely stood out to me. That was super creepy. I loved it. It was done so, it was so scary. There were like small jump scares, but not really. It was really just this foreboding feeling of, you know, she's being followed by these creatures. What is going to happen? So while that is happening, and while Diana is really just being stalked all over town, now we get to dive a little bit more deeply into what's happening with Ruby and Christina. And so I made a note, because when Christina had those men essentially kill her like Emmett Till had been killed, I made a note, and my note said, because I'm wondering if this comes out to be true, does she love Ruby? Because she knew that what was happening, like this was a national news story. So, and the reason why Emmett Till's mothers did it, so because not just for black people to see it, but for white people to see her son and how he had been killed and murdered, and just his body had been mutilated. And so people knew about this funeral, and they knew what was happening. And so for her to show up when Ruby comes home as William, when she just told, like, she, at this point, Christina can really no longer, she really doesn't have to be William for Ruby anymore, because Ruby knows the truth. Ruby knows that they're the same person. So really, for all intents and purposes, Christina can just drop the facade and just be Christina around Ruby. But she didn't. She showed up as William to be there for Ruby, and, you know, to take care of her, to she gave her because now it's full, it's William. William, you know, takes her into the house. She's fumbling with keys. He takes her into the house. He gives her a bath. He just wants to take care of her. He wants to, you know, be there for her. And I, you know, when I saw that, it didn't occur to me in that moment. It was just like, oh, here's William. He's here. Maybe, you know, maybe Christina went out to run an errand and she needed to be a man in the moment, you know, whatever the reason. But they had their scene, and then, you know, afterwards, of course, Ruby essentially, she confronts Christina and is like, do you even care about this boy who was murdered and mutilated? And Christina is essentially like, no, I don't care. But I didn't fully believe her. And that was kind of further confirmed when we see her get killed by these two guys that she pays. I was like, what's happening? I was like, oh, they are killing her the same way that Ruby described how Emmett Till was killed. And I just thought it was interesting. And so I would not be surprised if, you know, we're having a very interesting kind of display of a relationship between two people in this. I'm not even sure how to describe it. Like, I don't even have the vocabulary to describe it, because this is not something that I'm used to talking about on a regular basis. But it's a very interesting dynamic that they have. And I do think that there's some trust there. And I do think that Christina, you know, Ruby definitely has feelings for William, which is why she kind of you could see she felt betrayed last episode when she found out that Christina was William. But we now are starting to see that, which is what I was wondering, if William really was starting to develop actual feelings for Ruby, outside of just kind of, hey girl, I wouldn't get it popping with you, like I actually care about you. And now I'm starting to think that Christina is developing feelings and because now that they know the truth is out, you know, it's like, what does that mean for their relationship? And it looks like in next week's episode, we're going to get a little bit of insight, even more insight into their relationship. So that happens, and it's like, yo, now we have this weird kind of very unorthodox, but really kind of interesting, and in some parts really sweet relationship between William and Ruby and Christina. And then, of course, we now, you know, we all know Leti's pregnant, so we've gotten confirmation. We also have confirmation that Tic went through the portal, and I saw that, but it was like, well, what happened with him? Because we saw Hippolyta's journey, we didn't see his, and we find out that he went to the future. He brought back the book Lovecraft Country, written by George Wallace. We know that's his son, that Leti is, you know, newly carrying, and it's like, well, what does that mean? And so there's a lot in this episode, so I'm just kind of jumping around. But one of the things I really liked and appreciated is seeing Montrose and Atticus kind of push through their walls and their issues to come to an understanding, but also work together, and seeing them sit on that sidewalk and have this very honest conversation about why Montrose, you know, married Atticus's mom, and like they had this family together, and it's like, right, because when he, and this is something that I have heard other people who are, you know, sexually fluid, because I've heard it from kind of across the spectrum, where they knew that they didn't fit kind of this societal mode, but they have some type of external example of how someone who doesn't fit the societal mode is treated. And in Montrose's case, it's the pastor of his church. There's a rumor that he was, you know, with a man, and then he is arrested and put into a state mental hospital. And it's like, as an 8-year-old child, and you know, you're having these potential ideas and feelings and kind of questioning where you are with your own sexuality, and to see someone who is rumored to mirror your sexuality or be definitely not of the societal norm of what people deem as acceptable, and you see how this person is treated, it makes 100,000% like clear why he would decide, you know what, I don't want to end up in a mental institution or killed. I want to live. And so I'm going to find a woman who knows who I am, who accepts me for who I am, but who wants a family, because I also want a family, and we're just going to come together and we're going to have a family. And I really like that representation of a marriage, because we have George and we have Hippolyta's representation, which is obviously they're really into each other, they really love each other, they're really like they have this partnership, and it's like, I'm married, you know, the person that I love. And then on the other hand, we have Montrose and Atticus's mother, whose name I just completely forgot, and their marriage was more about just creating a family and having a familial bond, and I can appreciate that. So I thought that was really cool to kind of see their relationship begin to form outside of the anger and the violence, and be able to work through those things and come to their own common ground. I thought that was awesome. But in the same moment, you know, now, and Gia is here. So Gia comes, and we find out that Gia, you know, she does love Tic, and she's here to help him survive. And so she comes to tell them what she saw in her vision, which I thought was dope to see that. And then to see Leti and Gia kind of sitting across from each other, like, we love the same man, this is crazy. Of course, Atticus responded to Gia very negatively, because I guess, you know, when you're having sex with somebody and 9 foxtails come out and take over your body, that's upsetting. And so he has to reckon with what that means. So I wonder, I would like to see that played out, addressed in this season. However, we only have 2 episodes left, so I would love to see that their relationship or some clarity come out in maybe the next season. Can we please get a second season of this? Goodness. But I was hoping that she would come. She came, and so she is now here in the mix, and we'll see what happens. But I'm looking at my notes, and like I said, there was so much, and I'm really just jumping around. And then we also learned that Tic is supposed to die soon. And so he cast a protection spell. And at first we see, okay, nothing happened. They cast a spell. He's like, oh, damn. And then the creatures show up. And it's like, yo, his protection spell is he basically summoned the multi-eye creatures that we met in the first episode, which I find interesting. That's the spell that he has, and that's the spell that Christina kind of helped him create. But also on the flip side, she imbues Leti with the inability to die, and we see that when it definitely put me in the mind of what happened with the Black Panthers and Fred Hampton when he was murdered by the Los Angeles police in California, when he was murdered, where they like shot up his apartment, and him and like other people in there were all killed. That's kind of gave me that thought when they shot up Leti's house, but Leti sits up and like the bullets are just essentially like bouncing off of her. It's like she's a force field, which I think is dope. And I want to see how that's going to play out. But that is, you know, I'm sure, I feel like I'm leaving something, because even the whole thing, just as a side note, with Ruby as the white woman having sex with William, and then she transforms into Ruby in the middle of the sex. First of all, that was aggressive. But also, I wrote down orgasmic transformation. Like, what is that about? So now I have so much Googling to do and so much research to do to just understand some of these themes that I saw. And I'm so interested to hear Lovecraft Radio. So if you're not already tuning in, I'm dropping a link below. You should listen to it, because it includes a writer on the show and then a horror fan, and they're just discussing the themes. But because we have a writer on the show there, we get a lot of inside track. So you should definitely check it out, and I'll definitely drop the link below, as I do with every episode. But like, orgasmic transformation, like, first of all, that was like 1 part's erotic, 2 parts a lot and aggressive, with the blood and the body and the pumping out and the rebirth in the middle of the sex. Like, that was a lot. But another note, and so I will kind of close on this because I feel like I'm all over the place, but this episode was so chock full of stuff that I can't pick one thing. But I wonder if Christina is a representation of white feminism, of a white feminist, because it's like, in one moment she is team woman, team girl power, because, you know, Leti summons her to church, to the chapel. They meet, and Letty's like, here are the pages. She took, you know, the picture she took of the pages, but I need you to make Tic invulnerable. And she's like, no, I will make you invulnerable. So it's like, on one side, she's all about empowering the women that are involved in this whole, whatever journey, this whole situation. She wants to empower the women, because she does similar things to Ruby that she says to her. But on the other hand, she is also kind of sabotaging them for her own personal gain. And that is something that is I've seen that conversation had, very spirited conversation that I've had when having conversations with watching like white feminists and black feminists, and kind of in that whole where they're both about, you know, women, but white feminists are like, yeah, I want to do it, but I'll uplift you when I'm ready for you to be uplifted in the way that works for me. But when you start to do too much, it's like, you should chill out, because it's about our cause. And so that is a theme and a conversation that I've seen very regularly. And so I'm curious. And so if she's a representation of that, I'm guessing, I haven't really heard or seen that spoken about. Doesn't mean it hasn't been, I just haven't seen it. And so I'm very curious. But that was episode 8 of Lovecraft Country, Jig-a-Bobo. And yo, that was a lot. Again, cocktail. It was a lot. So what did you think? What were your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen next week? We saw the preview, so we definitely see that the critters got Diana, the critters, the children got Diana, and she is not dead, thank goodness. I was like, please don't kill Diana, like, goodness gracious. But she's spelled, she's definitely cursed. So what is going to happen next? So what do you think is going to happen next? What are your thoughts about tonight's episode? What are some of your theories about what's happening? Was it too much for you? Because definitely they came back to the horror tonight. Tonight was full blown, like, we're gonna scare you, and because I just watched it, and I'm about to look at a palate cleanser of some kind so that I can sleep nicely, because the way those children were creeping behind doors, it's not gonna work for me. So I'm gonna look at a nice comedy or a rom-com tonight before I go to sleep. What are your thoughts? Share them below. Let's have a conversation in the comments about season 8 of Lovecraft Country. I'm excited. It was great. What did you think? So this was fun. I'm so happy. I'm excited to see where we go with this season. But next week we'll be back. And then until then, I look forward to the next time that we can talk again.